Well, let's jump right into it here. Montana's U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme here in studio with us on Montana Talks. Kurt, great to see you as always. And, on this Patriot Day, on this 19 years 9/11 anniversary, I know you work so closely with law enforcement and first responders as you prosecute some of these major crimes here in Montana. I tell you, just this week alone, the service and the sacrifice from law enforcement, firefighters, and other first responders helping to fight these fires and take care of families here in Montana has just been remarkable. And to me, it's kind of a living testament to those who made the ultimate sacrifice on 9/11, the service and sacrifice that we're seeing right here in our own backyards this week.
Good morning, Aaron. Yes, thanks for bringing that up to start the show off. The first point to be made is how our law enforcement is doing a tremendous job at this point. Going back to 9/11, our law enforcement always do, and our first responders always do. There's always an exception, and we've talked about some of those exceptions nationwide, but by and large, the rank and file of our first responders and our law enforcement are heroes, and they deserve our thanks. During COVID, we've seen violent crime rates go up. We've seen and our first responders don't get to hide. They don't get to stay in their homes and offices like the rest of us. They're out on the street every day dealing with these issues, and couldn't be more grateful for their service.
Yeah, and their jobs are getting even harder now in the wake of COVID-19 and the associated shutdowns, and when kids were out of school, and even in some parts of Montana where kids are back in school, they're only in school for maybe a couple of days a week in some Montana schools. The rest, they might be at home alone. We hear day-to-day numbers, daily reports on latest COVID-19 infections and things like that. But what we don't hear are the daily reports and the daily numbers of the side effects of some of these shutdowns and closures and decisions that are being made here. Are you seeing a direct correlation between the increase in crime with some of these shutdowns?
Oh, we are. There is no doubt that methamphetamine and COVID-related domestic violence are driving our violent crime rate. Since COVID started in March, we've seen a 21% increase in violent crime in Yellowstone County alone. And it's not just violent crime. The crimes are more violent. We've already had 10 murders since the beginning of March. We had 8 all last year. And there's shootings. There's been more stabbings. Robberies alone are up 44% since COVID started in March. So we're seeing more violent crime, and we're seeing higher degree of it. And then the second part of that is domestic violence. As individuals are home, stress levels are up. People are locked up together or spending time together in the same house, not getting out to school or work. And then you have alcohol and meth in the mix. It's a volatile combination.
Yeah. And we've heard about some of these, the increases in concerns about mental health, increases in suicide, increase in domestic violence, increases in child abuse, although the reports aren't coming in as much on child abuse because usually it's the teachers who are going to spot this. So when kids were out of school, those reports weren't coming in. But I had a chance to catch up with Billings Police Chief Rich St. John before I left a few weeks ago, and I asked him what's driving this, because you're right, there's been this string of homicides, in particular in Billings, and he says all comes back to meth. And apparently, COVID really disrupted the Mexican drug cartel's meth markets. And so that is also part of what's fueling this violence as well.
Oh, absolutely. So what happened worldwide is when COVID hit, the precursor chemicals that by and large get shipped from China to the Mexican cartels where the meth is made, that supply line got disrupted. And then as the United States shut down our southern border to all but essential travel, that disrupted the Mexican cartel's ability to move the meth into the United States. So supply dropped significantly. Price went up, almost doubling in this region. Even though that's occurring, though, meth use has gone up. So that's also contributed to the price increasing. So it's a strange combination. It's a strange market right now. But we're having an impact on meth price and meth supply, and COVID is certainly having that effect too. But right now we haven't seen the related drop in meth use, which is what you'd expect, because price is more likely to impact beginning users, people who are getting started, not individuals who are already using and already addicted.
Yeah, and I know it's very concerning because prior to this point, you were starting to see some remarkable progress thanks to your efforts working with state, local, federal law enforcement and other, treatment programs and things like that. You started to kind of finally flatten that increase in violent crime in Yellowstone County, where you first reinvigorated the Project Safe Neighborhoods program. And then in Missoula, remarkable, you started to see double-digit decreases instead of double-digit increases in crime.
That's exactly right, just with the enforcement effort. And again, got to go back to thanking the officers, the deputies, the agents, the troopers on the ground. of our federal, state, and local law enforcement colleagues who've just done a fantastic job across the state. I mean, we've had over 500 prosecutions for PSN statewide, and a lot of them have focused in our urban areas. They've just done a great job hitting meth dealers, hitting armed robbers, picking up violent felons with firearms, and we've been prosecuting them and have an impact. As you point out, double-digit decreases in Missoula after substantial increases that we had been seeing. And in Billings, we were able to flatten things out. And then last year, even before COVID started, and certainly since COVID started, violent crime is back on the increase in Yellowstone County.
All right, well, jumping right back into it here, Montana's U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme joining us here on Montana Talks. Not only are we seeing an increase in crime and the violent crime here in Montana directly associated with COVID, with the COVID-19 shutdowns and school shutdowns and other things like that, but we're also unfortunately seeing a double-digit spike in meth use. And I know some of the ways that they're able to spot this is through the urinalysis testing that goes on in various parts of the state of Montana. So we're talking about those stories, but there's more that we need to get to as well when it comes to efforts to crack down on the drug cartels on our southern border, illegal immigration, much more. Plus, COVID-19 impacting our jails, impacting our prisons. We'll talk about what's happening with the Department of Corrections here in Montana as well. And we got the phone lines open for you. If you've got a question for U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme, if you want to talk about something else, we will open up the phone lines in the second half hour of the show. First up, before we get to our Farm and Ranch report, it looks like we got John Sinrud on the line out of Kalispell with the Montana Landowners Association. John, good to hear from you. Did you have a question or comment for Kurt?
I do. Kurt, I've got a question with the CDC moratorium on evictions for non-payment of rent. And a landlord, there's issues that may go on along with non-payment of rent. Are you guys going to be prosecuting that if something is brought to your attention where a unsuspecting landlord goes in and does an eviction, there's issues along with non-payment of rent and other things? And then how's that prosecution going to work? I mean, it's $100,000 fine, up to $250 per instance, and if somebody dies, the landlord can get jail time.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, thanks for that, John. Yeah, and Kurt. Yeah, I'm not sure. Would that be prosecuted in federal courts, or would that be maybe a state court issue there?
That's a federal court issue. John, good morning. And the answer is, I'm not sure. We haven't had that situation arise yet. This is new. We'll have to see how this plays out. Of course, our office is charged with enforcing federal law, so that will eventually come to us if that becomes an issue. But I think, with all of the issues during COVID and during this process, I think everyone is wise just to apply a reasonableness standard. We all need to help each other out. We all need to look after each other. This is new for everybody, and we all need to take that into account as we're all working together as community to try to work our way through this. So I don't have a hard and fast answer for you, John, but obviously our office will enforce the law. That's what we're charged to do. But I hope all of us apply a good standard of reasonableness to all issues during COVID.
Kurt, we talked about the increased meth use, the increased crime that has now happened directly after all of these COVID-19 shutdowns this past spring. And then to compile the issues there, we've had jails that have already been kind of overcrowding. I know Yellowstone County, I know they've had challenges in other detention facilities across the state. And meanwhile, you had the State Department of Corrections, our state prison was being pressured by the ACLU and others to push prisoners out of the prison because of COVID-19 concerns, which to me, it seemed like the best place you could quarantine folks would be in a prison versus letting lawless individuals running the streets. But I have heard that there is an issue with the prison putting too many people back out on the streets or not accepting people into the prison from these county jails, which is only adding to the overcrowding problems. Talk about how that might be challenging law enforcement efforts here.
You bet, Aaron. So 3 things. First of all, you're right. I think our sheriffs in Montana, by the way, have done an outstanding job of running their jails during COVID. And everyone learns the further on we go. And one thing I think that was learned early is you don't let people out of jail just to have them rearrested and put back in, because what happens is people come out of jail, get exposed to COVID, and then bring it back into the jail. So people have to have a longer term, more thoughtful view about releasing from jails and prisons, and think that's happening now. Problem we're running into that you're alluding to is in a lot of the jails now, the State Department of Corrections is not allowing prisoners to be transferred from county jails to Deer Lodge and to DOC facilities. And that's causing a problem because in the counties now, jail populations are starting to rise. And when that happens, it's harder for the sheriffs to control COVID and be sure that everyone's able to be kept safe. Now, in the federal system, once we get a defendant sentenced, the Marshal Service is putting those individuals on airplanes and buses and getting them out to the Bureau of Prisons and taking pressure off the jails. But we have had some issues with that in the state, and I hope that there's a process that can be developed to safely move prisoners back into state custody so that we can take pressure off of our county jails.
Yeah, especially it seems like there's a more transient population in these county jails. So if you're truly concerned about spreading COVID-19 more through jails or prison, prison is a better place for these individuals to go rather than in a jail where you might have somebody in there for a couple of days and then back out on the streets or something like that. Want to talk about the southern border as well and the efforts, because as the U.S. Attorney here in Montana, of course, you're a part of the broader Department of Justice working closely with Attorney General Bill Barr. But we got another caller on the line. And by the way, the number for you, if you got a question or a comment, 406-294-0970. And Kurt said he's willing to stick around as long as you've got questions for him here. So that's great. So because he just says how important it is to get the word out on these issues and the help that you can provide. Next up on the phone lines, Dale in Mosby, Montana. Dale, good to hear from you.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. Kurt, I got a question for you, and I can give you some names off the air, but I'm dealing with a contractor that has defrauded me and my insurance company out of about $24,000, and I have evidence to the facts, and I've already spoken with my insurance company and numerous people at the state level, and I can't seem to get anybody interested in helping me out with this. And this has been going on for a year. It's a year this month. And I wondered, I know you guys are really busy and you got a lot of problems to deal with, but I was wondering why it's just kind of swept under the rug. And this is not the only one that this person has done. There's another person that's lost 3 times as much as me, and we can't seem to get anybody to help us out.
And so is this like an insurance issue or an unemployment issue, or what specific kind of issue? I guess I know you can only speak generally because we don't want to give out names over the air, et cetera.
Yeah, it's definitely an insurance. It's insurance fraud through my insurance company.
All right. Well, thanks, Dale, for calling in. Appreciate your phone call. Yeah, and Kurt, kind of your response to Dale might be insightful for the rest of us in terms of, hey, if you have an issue that you feel might merit a federal investigation or a federal prosecution, where do you even start?
Sure. Yeah. No, appreciate that, Dale. First thing for anybody who's been defrauded is go immediately to the PD and the sheriff's office. I'm sure you've done that, Dale. Most fraud cases, unless they involve the banking system or interstate commerce, are going to be under the jurisdiction of the state. Now, if they cross state lines, involve the banking system, then it becomes a federal crime also. And so, by all means, you can reach out to my office, and we can get this referred to the proper federal investigative agency. But I think given the amounts you've described and the fact that it's contractor fraud, the first step would definitely be the police department or the sheriff's office in your jurisdiction. And again, you may already reached out to them, so you're welcome to forward that on to my office, and we can take a look at it and be sure it gets to the right investigative agency.
About 1 minute before our next break here, U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme, I believe he's Acting Secretary Chad Wolf from the Department of Homeland Security. I think he delivered his State of the Homeland address yesterday, I believe. Talked about not only terrorism, obviously in light of the 19th anniversary of 9/11, but also talked about border security and much more. What can you tell us about the efforts to crack down on our illegal immigration on our southern border and, of course, the drug flow from the drug cartel? And we got about 30 seconds before our next break.
You bet. So the big announcement yesterday, Attorney General Barr and DEA Administrator Shea were down in Phoenix and announced the effects of Operation Crystal Shield, where we targeted numerous border cities, which are the wholesale jump-off points for Mexican cartels to move meth into the United States. And again, almost all of our meth, for those listeners who aren't aware of this, almost all of our meth comes from Mexican cartels. And so it rolls through wholesale cities before it hits Montana. And last year they announced, or yesterday they announced 1,840 arrests and seizures of almost 29,000 pounds and $43 million in drug proceeds in those cities. All of those things benefit us in Montana because those drugs will otherwise be on our streets.
That's where it comes, yeah. There's a lot of people not seeking health care right now because of COVID-19, the ongoing concern. And people just make this actually false assumption, and I know from talking with healthcare officials as well, that, well, I don't want to go in. I don't want to overwhelm the hospitals. No, that go, if you need something medical taken care of, go in and get treatment, get help, get your annual checkups because you don't want to miss a cancer screening or something like that. In the same regard, I know you're not just big on supporting law enforcement, you're big on supporting, a multi-pronged approach to combating meth. And so, talking to the break, you're saying, look, these folks, if you can get one message across today, it's get help. Go get treatment right now. They've got space available right at the Rimrocks and the other places, right?
That's right. Yeah, we have mental health providers all around the state who are on standby to take people safely in either for inpatient or for outpatient substance abuse treatment. And people should go out and get it. With the rise in domestic violence that we're seeing around the state, part of that is driven by high stress levels. And people are medicating, self-medicating with alcohol. They're self-medicating with methamphetamine, and then they're taking it out on their family. So if you're someone out there who's feeling your stress level going up, and if you're realizing your behavior is changing and you're using drugs more often or you're using alcohol, go get help. It's out there. It's available to you. And also as a community, we need, in Yellowstone, we need to support Yellowstone Substance Abuse Connect. Missoula just was awarded a similar sizable grant through HIDA and the Office of National Drug Control Policy to build a meth treatment and prevention program in Missoula, similar to what's being built in Yellowstone County. And I would encourage all your listeners to support not only law enforcement in this work, but also our treatment and prevention efforts, a three-prong approach to try to get on top of the substance abuse problem.
Yeah, in fact, it was interesting. I shared the news yesterday. Vice President Mike Pence is going to be back in Montana on Monday in Belgrade alongside Senator Steve Daines. And I had shared the video footage from the last time Vice President Pence, one of the last times Vice President Pence was here in Montana. It was just about 1 year ago. He was here, and I know met with you and others, and actually went to the Willow Way treatment program, and met with these women who were recovering from a meth addiction thanks to those treatment programs. So that support for these treatment programs goes all the way to the top.
Yeah, appreciated Vice President Pence coming here. He actually highlighted our Yellowstone Substance Abuse Connect program and gave it some national attention, which was fantastic. Right now we have over 100 nonprofit and community government organizations in Yellowstone County that are part of that coalition.
All right. And Kurt, before you run back to the office, because I know you got a busy day, we've got a caller on the line with it looks like either a question or a comment for you. Polly in Lion Mountain, good to hear from you. You're on with Kurt Alme.
Hello, thank you. Attorney, sir, I'm concerned about Montana, not all these other places, but what is the attorney's office? Are they prosecuting these hooligans who are pulling all these bad shenanigans against our police department and sheriff department? Or are you guys going to pat them on the head and say, oh, that's okay, you were only protesters? I'm talking about the really mean, bad people. Are you going to put them in jail? Are you going to get a big net?
That's a great question. Great question. Yeah, the rioting, the looting, the destruction of major American cities. Are these people going to be held accountable?
Yeah, thanks, Paulie, for that question. Yeah, the civil unrest that we're seeing around the country is a high priority for federal law enforcement, and it's important to stress that we are ideologically neutral. People certainly have a First Amendment right to assemble, to petition the government, and to protest, and we want to facilitate that. But when people cross the line to violence and inciting violence and target police officers, it doesn't matter what your ideological point of view is, that can't be tolerated in a civilized society and isn't tolerated under under federal law. And law enforcement and federal law enforcement will arrest those individuals, and we will prosecute them federally. Thankfully, in Montana, our protests have been very civil. We've had protests of all different ideologies, and that's a healthy thing as we head into an election. But appreciate you pointing out in other places of the country, the line has been crossed into violence, and that won't be tolerated.
Yeah, and I think I've seen indictments already come down and arrests already been made. I know Attorney General Bill Barr has made that a significant priority. U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for dropping in. Thanks for taking phone calls. Doors open anytime you need to get some important message out across Montana. Drop in and see us, even unannounced. We keep the phone lines open. We keep the doors open. So drop in anytime.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. All right. Well, here in the few minutes that we have left on the show, as promised, we're going to open up the phone lines for you and anything and everything you want to talk about here on Montana Talks. Let's jump right into it here. Fred in Kalispell, listening to KJJR. Fred, good to hear from you. What's on your mind?
I want to ask Kurt a question.
Oh, okay. He's still here. Okay, great.
When are we going to start enforcing the Constitution? The Democrats are totally violating it every day. They're pushing communism. They're pushing socialism. They're pushing all this Antifa. They're pushing all this garbage that's happening. When are we going to start prosecuting Nancy Pelosi and all these clowns in Washington, D.C.? One more thing. The COVID virus, in my opinion, is nothing but a bunch of bull pushed by the Democrats.
Which one?
Good day, gentlemen.
What was the last? What was the last comment there, Fred?
The COVID virus is a thing pushed by the Democrats. I don't believe it's real. I refuse to wear a mask, and I haven't had no problems until I'm 80 years old. It's all a bunch of bull.
All right. Well, Fred, great to hear from you.
Us.
Well, Fred, great to hear from you. Yeah, I did see. I don't know if you saw this, Fred. The health official for Los Angeles apparently was on the record saying that they'll be done after the November elections. That's what the LA health officials like. Oh brother, here we go. Well, anyway, kind of a comment there, but U.S. Attorney Kurt Alme, I don't know if Nancy Pelosi, if that would be if that might be a city violation there instead of a federal one when she went into the salon, but similar remarks from Fred about violating, going after the rioters, et cetera.
Yeah, similar comments to Paulie. When we, those of us who are in law enforcement and have been given the honor of being in law enforcement, being part of the prosecutors and the Department of Justice, we're very careful to be sure we're ideologically neutral and we prosecute actions, not ideology. But when ideology crosses the line and violates federal law, that's when we get involved. But we're very careful to be unbiased and neutral in how we apply that law. And that's what democracy requires.